Welcome in. Today I'm going to be going over my Omnioculous Hunter build for Grandmaster Nightfalls, specifically for Grandmasters. This build excels in the hardest content in the game because it's very sneaky, can go invisible, make your team invisible forever, which just makes capturing objectives or doing certain tasks in Grandmasters that are normally very dangerous, very hard to do, makes them very easy. To be really effective with this build, you have to have a knowledge of the cooldowns, the invisibility, and Omnioculous, and some different things that all go into this to make it so you can do permanent invisibility, and I'll show you just how that works. This setup is specifically for this week's Grandmaster Nightfall, which had Barrier and Unstoppable and a Solar Surge, but this strategy and setup can basically work with anything with just moving around a couple weapons, depending on the Nightfall. First of all, let's talk about Omnioculous. You gain a second smoke bomb charge and have damage resistance while invisible, and when you make an ally invisible, they gain damage resistance, and you gain melee energy. For each ally that you make invisible, and that's very specific, each ally that you make go from visible to invisible, you get half of your smoke bomb energy back. So if you do your slam and make your teammate invisible, you will get half your energy back. But if you do it again and they're still invisible when you slam, yes, you will make them invisible for longer, but the act of making them visible to invisible is what gives you your snare bomb energy back. Show you a quick example of this. So as you can see here, when I do my slam, both of my teammates are visible. I make them both go invisible. It does not use up a smoke bomb charge because they're both visible to invisible. Real quick, I did want to mention that I just got partnered on YouTube and made a membership on the YouTube, so you can go there and get early access to videos and badges and some special stuff, so make sure to check out the membership. For the subclass, I've picked all of these abilities, aspects, fragments, and super, all very intentionally to accomplish certain goals in GMs, to be able to move payloads forward, to be able to capture certain areas, to be able to hide your whole team, different things like that. This is all made to go invisible, to protect your team, have a ton of different ways to survive, to weaken enemies, you can do so much for your team in this. For the super, I prefer Deadfall, but you can also get away with using Mobius Quiver, especially if it's a GM where you need a little bit more burst damage on a boss. Then I would go with Mobius Quiver. But Deadfall is nice because it lasts a bit longer and you can lock down a whole area just a little bit easier with it. So let's look at the aspects. The first one we have is Vanishing Step. Dodging makes you invisible. So that's your very first way of going invisible. It's kind of the main way that everybody already knows. Very simple. You dodge, you go invisible. Next up after that we have Trapper's Ambush. Activate Quick Fall to spend your melee charge and dive to the ground, creating a large smoke cloud on impact, which then dissipates. Targets caught in the cloud are weakened, and allies are made invisible. It doesn't say it, but so are you. So with those aspects in mind, let's look at the abilities. Gambler's Dodge will recharge your melee now, so you go invisible and you get your melee back. Your melee also now makes you go invisible when you activate Quick Fall to make your whole team invisible. So now your dodge not only makes you invisible, but it also recharges your melee, which can make you invisible again. Then for the jump, pick whatever jump you're comfortable with. I always love triple jump for PvE. And the grenade's really up to you. I prefer Vortex Grenade. Most of the Void Grenades are pretty good. Scatter's really good. Presser can be used in certain situations, but Vortex Grenade does a lot of damage and moves all the little adds into one singular spot, which is really nice. And then I've picked the fragments to just assist in going invisible and making your team invisible and surviving through that. Echo of Persistence, void buffs applied to you, invisibility, overshield, and devour have increased duration. So this one thing to keep in mind when running Echo of Persistence is that your void invisibility timer will be different than your teammates, because they probably won't be running Echo of Persistence. So if you go and Trapper's Ambush your teammates, make them both invisible, you might have a 9-second timer going. They'll have a 7-second timer going. This adds 2 seconds to that. So you have to keep that in mind when you continue continue to make them invisible. Typically, when my timer says 2 is when I'm trying to make them go back invisible again. And then Echo of Starvation, picking up a Void Breach or Orb of Power grants Devour, just some heals, very needed with this build. Echo of Obscurity, Finisher Final Blows grant invisibility. This is one way to continue the play loop in case you do mess up and run out of energy, or your teammates are just far away, you have no way of going invisible. Just finish a little ad or a big ad, whatever it is, and you'll go back invisible. Echo of Provision, damaging targets with grenades grants melee energy. This is just to ensure that you can get more snare bombs back using your grenades now. So now you can get full snare bombs back if you dodge near enemies, and you can get partial snare bombs back if you damage enemies with a grenade. Then as far as mods, we're kind of going the same exact direction as we did with the fragments, in just making all this play loop work better together and last longer and do it more. So that said, starting with the helmet, we have Heavy Ammo Finder to get more heavy, do more burst damage, and Heavy Ammo Scout to help your teammates find more heavy. I'm using Solar Siphon specifically because in this Grandmaster I was using Polaris Lance. Whatever your main weapon is, you want to have that siphon. So if you're using a kinetic weapon instead, then use Kinetic Siphon. For the gloves, Momentum Transfer, causing damage with grenade reduces your melee cooldown, kind of the same exact thing as Echo of Provision. And then Bolstering Detonation grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a grenade. And then Focusing Strike grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a powered melee attack. All these three things kind of go hand in hand together to just make that play loop more seamless and easy. Then on the chest, I just have 3 resistance mods, whatever the Nightfall calls for. This was extra Void Threat, 25% more Void damage. So I did 2 Void and 1 Arc because there was Arc snipers. So it helps to know what you're getting into, to know what resistances to put on. And then the leg armor, I did Absolution, reduces all ability cooldowns each time you pick up an orb. Recuperation replenishes health each time you pick up an orb. And better already, your health begins to regenerate immediately after picking up an orb of power. So all of this goes together to keep you alive and keep your abilities coming back, and stacks on top of Devour for more healing. On the cloak, I have Proximity Ward, gain a powerful overshield while performing your finisher. So in order to not die in the middle of finishers, you get your overshield, and then as soon as you're done with the finisher, you immediately go invisible from Echo of Obscurity. And then Outreach reduces melee cooldown when using your class ability. Your melee next to enemies already gives you back 1 full snare bomb, but with this, if you're missing 2 snare bombs and you do a dodge, you get 1 and plus a little bit. And then Distribution reduces all ability cooldowns when using your class ability near targets. These do stack on each other, so you'll get even more melee back, but also you'll get more class ability back, and you'll get more grenade back. I'm going to show you how to stay invisible for a long time. I always like to burn the quick fall first. Do 2 of those. This guy's ready for a finisher, so I can just go straight to finisher while stuff cools down. That guy there's ready for a finisher. Now they're all shielded, so I can't use a finisher, but I can use my dodge. Now I got 2 quick falls to use. On this next one, I'll throw a grenade and then quick fall. That helps get my energies back. Now I have a dodge. Now I have 2 quick falls again. You always want to try to do a little bit of damage with your quick fall if you can, because that helps you just get your class ability back. Now I can dodge again. For the artifact, there's not a ton in here that helps you, but what's important if you're using solar is Flint Striker here. Rapid solar weapon, precision hits, and rapid solar weapon final blows grant radiant. This helps you stun champions, especially barrier champions, because radiant effects go through barrier. So with Polaris Lance, you can stun Unstoppable and you can stun barrier if you have Flint Striker and you get yourself radiant. And then this stuff helps just from buffing radiant. Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched combatants. Even when you're not a solar subclass, you'll still be scorching things and blowing stuff up. And Torch, while radiant, deal increased weapon damage to combatants affected by Strand and Stasis. Blast Radius if you're using a grenade launcher. From Whence You Came to do more damage to Taken and Scorn. Wished into Being is really good. While your super is nearly fully charged, ability Final Blows spawn orbs of power, and wearing Season of the Wish armor decreases super amount threshold. So the more Season of the Wish armor you can wear from the Riven vendor, the better. If I could wear all Season of the Wish vendor armor, I would, and you just make even more orbs. I think this thing is undervalued this season, and it really makes a ton of orbs. And then Overload rocket launchers in case you're going up against Overload. And then Argent Ordnance to just do more damage and faster reloads with rockets. As far as weapons go, this is how I had my setup for this week's GM. There is a lot of flexibility with which weapons you want to run. It really depends on which champions you need to stun for the certain GM and what shields you'll be breaking and how much burst damage you have to do versus sustained damage. So this is my setups for this week's, and particularly because neither of my teammates were running anything to stun Unstoppable, so I just threw on Fatebringer hand cannon to stun Unstoppables. I would have rather had a special weapon probably to do more damage and clear more ads. I was the only one running a dedicated Unstoppable, not predicated on Scorching and Igniting. So went with Fatebringer. And then had Polaris Lance. Polaris Lance is really good in Grandmaster this season, especially because of Flint Striker getting Radiant and doing 25% more damage that way, and then just scorching everything, Dragonfly, igniting the stuff. It really is a crazy weapon, especially for Grandmasters and hard content where you have to shoot things a ton. And then I had Apex Predator just for burst damage with bait and switch reconstruction, so I can fire off 2 rockets really fast that are super strong. There are a bunch of different ways to set this up. I could have ran a Cartesian here or something, some random fusion rifle, and done Wish Ender, and that would have taken care of barriers. I could switch out Apex for a fusion rifle down here to do more precision damage, or could have used Fixed Odds to clear more ads. And now that I'm thinking about it for this week's GM, Fixed Odds probably would have been a lot better. But I did really like this setup here. It felt very safe. I think if I go back in, I'll probably switch out for Fixed Odds and do this setup here. As far as stats for the build, they're actually pretty important for this build. I wouldn't suggest running this build unless you can get your resistance up to 100 and your melee up to at least 70, because otherwise you're not going to have enough time to go invisible and it's going to be pretty rough. So I would really work on getting the right gear, farming the Season of the Wish armor, which helps you make more orbs, and it's pretty high stat. So yeah, I bought a ton of the Season of the Wish stuff to try to boost up my numbers. I just haven't hit on any of them yet. I'm going to keep buying those and keep trying to swap out this gear to get some of my other numbers up. Ideally, it'd be 100 resilience, 100 strength, and 100 mobility. Obviously, triple 100 is very difficult to do, especially when it's something that you don't typically build for on a hunter, so I haven't focused armor into strength. Haven't really kept a ton of high strength hunter gear over the years, so that's why my stats aren't quite as good on this build. But what's really important is 100 resilience and 100 strength. The other numbers don't really matter all that much. If you can get your grenade up too, that'd be great, because then that helps with the play loop. But I had to sacrifice discipline for strength, basically, to make this work. Then I do get some questions about the armor ornaments when I run this build, and that's because this is the Emperor's Agent set. It's from the Leviathan raid, the Prestige mode of Leviathan, the very first hard mode of the very first raid in Destiny 2. So sorry, it's not available anymore. The first glowy thing you could ever get in the game. That's it. That's the build. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate your time. Please subscribe. Peace.